Hello everybody. This is the video of going over the ancient China PowerPoint. And so if you missed any days of class, you can watch this video. And I usually suggest to all my students, especially if you think that I'm moving too fast, the point of these videos is to keep them short. And so I might talk a little bit fast through them, but I would advise you to screenshot the screens to fill in your notes or to go back and read them yourselves. So this is just a little timeline of the dynasties in China. It's not in your notes anywhere, but it's just there for reference so that you can kind of see the different dynasties. And the ones that we focus on really are these first few right here. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Ancient China's climate. Most of eastern China is covered with fertile soils. Just like the other civilizations we've talked about, they're covered with fertile soils. Some religions are better suited than others for growing certain crops. Some regions are better suited than others for growing certain crops. In southern China, it's warm and receives plenty of rainfall, which makes it excellent for growing rice. It's an excellent region for growing rice. Rice really thrives in an environment that's warm and has a lot of rain and is like, a little bit more humid maybe. Further north, so the more northern part of China, further north, the climate is cooler and drier, which makes it more suitable for things like grains and wheat. The combination of rivers for irrigation along with fertile soil for planting allowed China to thrive, as did China's relative isolation. They had landforms, just like the Indus Valley did, that helped keep them separated from other civilizations. And so the mountains, the hills, and the desert protected China from outside invasion. However, the Mongols from the north and the rival factions often fought, so there were interior conflicts. The Himalayan mountains would separate China from India, as well as the rest of southern Asia, and the vast Gobi Desert protected China from the north. And again, I don't know, sometimes I may pronounce some of these things wrong. The Taklamakan Desert protected China from the west. This is a little bit of a map from China, from ancient China, what it would have looked like. The portion in green would have been the Shang dynasty, the first dynasty that we'll talk about, the Shang dynasty. And then the yellow, orangey color would be the Zhao dynasty. And so, just like the other civilizations, they really had a lot of water sources, and that's why they were able to thrive. Obviously, they're close to the sea, but they have these rivers, right? They have these rivers, and mostly they have the Yellow River. They have the Yellow River right here. The Yellow River goes through the more middle section. They are close to the Yangtze River. But the Yellow River was extremely important to ancient China. What geographic features influenced life in early China? The rivers deposited rich soil for farming. So, like I said, they had their two rivers. The rivers deposited the rich soil for farming, and the mountains, hills, and desert isolated the area. The ancient Chinese practiced ancestor worship. Ancestor worship is one of your vocabulary terms. Ancestor worship is the Chinese religious practice of honoring the spirits of dead family members and using oracle bones to communicate with them. They offered gifts to ancestors, had ritual meals to feed the ancestors, and the dead were buried with goods. Ancestors helped the living. So they believed that if they worshiped their ancestors, if they prayed to their ancestors, asked them for guidance, the ancestors would help them. Something that I told people that if they were in class would be like, if you've ever watched the movie Mulan, in Mulan, there's a lot of like different things about her ancestors, and it's an animation, so obviously it's dramatized. They do show the ancestors as like ghosts, but she goes to her, place of worship and worships her ancestors and asks them for guidance. Oracle bones. So as part of their worship, as part of, their ancestor worship, the Shang asked the ancestors for advice. They sought advice through the use of oracle bones. So they were bones that were inscribed into, so they'd inscribed bits of animal bones, such as turtle shell, and they'd use like calligraphy to write into the bones, and the living person asked a question of the ancestor. The living person would ask the ancestor a question, and then the bone would be heated, and the cracks in the bones from it getting heated up would be used to interpret the meaning and answer of the question. So the bone was heated, resulting in cracks on the bone surface, and specially trained priests interpreted the meaning of cracks to learn the answer. The history of the Shang dynasty, the first dynasties. The Shang is often believed to be one of the first dynasties, but it's not for sure. Like, they don't know that for sure. It's not always credited that way. So, a dynasty is a series of rulers from the same family. A dynastic system is one of your vocabulary words. It's a series of rulers from the same family. The Shang dynasty is not always credited as being China's first dynasty, like I said, but they did rule a broad area of northern China, and they ruled in China until the 1100s BC, which is about 600 years of rule. So that's a very long time. In class, I said, America has been a country, the United States has been a country for around 240-something years, and so that's a long time. They were in rule for longer than twice the amount of time that America has been a country. According to ancient Chinese records, the Shang dynasty formed around 1760 BC, although many archaeologists believe it actually began somewhat later than that. So their government and society, China ruled by a strong monarchy. They ruled by a strong monarchy. At capital city, the king was surrounded by the court, and rituals were performed to strengthen the kingdom as well as keep them safe. Under ruler, we have the king's governors ruled distant parts of the kingdom. So they did have governors within different regions of the kingdom because the king couldn't be everywhere at once. And he would have loyal officials that would govern from a distance. The king also had a large army at their disposal, and they prevented rebellions and fought outside opponents. Their agricultural society, the Shang China, was largely agricultural. Most people tended to crops in the fields, but farmers were also called on to fight in the army, work on building projects, tombs, palaces, or walls. The Zhao and Qin dynasties changed Chinese society and made great advances. The Zhao dynasty started a rebellion and overthrew the Shang rulers in the 1100s BC. The Zhao dynasty ended around 771 BC, and China entered a time of disorder known as the Warring States period. The Warring States period. So that's kind of like when all of their little areas, all their little local areas would fight with one another to try to take power of China. And so in 221 BC, a king from the state of Qin unified all of China under his control and ended the Warring States period. The Qin dynasty saw many great advances in China. The Zhao dynasty lasted longer than any other in Chinese history. They claimed that they had been chosen by heaven to rule China. This idea that heaven chose China's rulers and gave him or her power was called the mandate of heaven. So they believed that they were selected by heaven to be the rulers, and that is why they were able to overthrow the Shang. That's why they did that. They believed that they were given that as a mandate from heaven, that they were told to be the rulers. A new political order formed in China under the Zhao. The emperor was the head of Chinese society, and everything in China belonged to him, and everyone had to be loyal to him. So the emperor was the head of Chinese society. This is the dynastic cycle. I'm just going to go through this really quickly. On your notes, what you need to write is the arrows and the bold words. The arrows and the bold words. So, the rise and the fall of Chinese dynasties. I'm going to start up here, just for why not. A new dynasty rises, so a strong ruler defeats other local rulers, and the new dynasty expands China's borders. So, new dynasty forms. The new dynasty rules. It restores peace, it chooses loyal officials, and it makes reforms. So this is when the dynasty, takes its stride and really rules. But eventually, the dynasty is going to grow weak. They all eventually grow weak and are, they'll eventually fall, but they all grow weak. The dynasty grows weak, the large empire becomes difficult to govern, and the leaders lose control of the provinces. And so, like I said, the dynasty will then fall. The dynasty falls, rebellions destroy the weakened dynasty. And then a period of violence follows. So like we said, in the Warring States period, local rulers fight for power. So they fight for power, and then, again, a new dynasty rises because a strong ruler defeats the other local rulers. And so that's how the Qin came into power. During the Warring States period, the Qin defeated the others, and so they rose as the new dynasty. If I were you, I would screenshot this, fill in the arrows, and then the bold words. So a new dynasty rises, the new dynasty rules, all of that. Shang language, technology, and the fall. So they developed a form of Chinese writing called calligraphy. They were responsible for the development of Chinese writing called calligraphy. It's closely tied to the use of oracle bones because, like I said, they would inscribe into the oracle bones. They would use calligraphy to inscribe into the oracle bones. The earliest examples of Chinese writing are questions written on the bones themselves. So that's why it's closely tied to the use of oracle bones. And early Shang texts used picture symbols to represent objects and ideas. Calligraphy is also one of your vocabulary words. Calligraphy is. Bronze. The Shang religion led to great advances in working with bronze. The highly decorative bronze vessels and objects created for religious rituals, those are items that some of them are super old, and because they were made in bronze, they were able to last a very long time. And so their advances in working with bronze were pretty important. They also built huge structures like tombs, created calendars, and they had the first money system, the first money systems. But as they all do, the Shang dynasty does fall. And so the Shang ruled for more than 600 years until about 1100 BC, and ruling China's growing population just proved to be too much for the Shang to handle. So they're getting really big, and the Shang were starting to struggle to rule China. And so the armies from the nearby tribe, the Zhao, invaded and established a new ruling dynasty. So they invaded them because they were weakened. Like we said in that dynastic cycle, they were weakened, and they were overthrown by the Zhao. So that is actually all of the China PowerPoint. And like I said, I would go back through and screenshot those if I went a little too quick for you. I'm just trying to keep these videos short for you. That way you don't have to watch like a 30-minute video if you missed today's lesson. So if you have any questions, please feel free to message me. And have a nice rest of your day.